Hey everybody, welcome to this comparison of the 24-70 f2.8 and 24-105 f4 OS focal range lens comparison video. We're not going to be looking at any particular brand, more at the different and unique value propositions that each of these two lens types provide. And I want to kind of expand that to also intend and mean equivalence in APS-C, in micro four thirds, and so on. So if that looks like I don't know, like a 12 to 45, 12 to 35. So if that means like a 12 to 35 in micro four thirds or 16 to 55 in APS-C, I want to keep all those elements of that conversation around. And you know, this conversation, this comparison is one that happens a lot in comment sections in my own little pea brain. And you know, I think that for me at any rate, it's one that I dwell on perhaps more than I really ought to, because I'm always thinking, what would my ideal kit look like for any number of given situations, right? I'm a little prime heavy, I'm a little bit of a prime whore, I love bokeh, I love sharpness, and so I'm thinking, you know, what would be a good lens to replace primes for travel? What would be a good lens for having enough focal range? You know, there's a lot of questions like that float around in my own little head. I specifically want to be comparing these lenses in this video on unequal footing. You know, it doesn't make any sense in my mind. It feels like it's actually a rather foolish proposition to say we're going to take the 24-70 f2.8 and the 24-105 f4 and compare them between 24 and 70 and f4 and f8. Like, without optical stabilization. That doesn't make sense. That's not a real world scenario. So instead, we're going to be talking about the differences and why they're really important in helping you make your choice, because you know, these are such prevalent focal ranges, despite being micro four thirds, APS-C, full frame, whatever it is, very prevalent focal ranges, and you'll probably end up with one of these two at some point during your photographic lifespan, if you will. Hey guys, quick aside, I would love to get this video to 200 or 300 likes. You know, I've had videos hit like 650 after asking y'all for them, and that was huge to be able to have y'all help me reach that personal goal. But I'd really love to get more of my content getting more engagement, and I think with that as kind of my next big personal goal, I'd really appreciate it if y'all would help me with that. Thank you. Let me walk you through how I've historically thought about this, right? The 24-105 f4L IS-USM was the second lens I ever bought. I was thinking, you know, what if this is my last lens ever? It's got to be able to have stabilization. It's got to be sharp enough. It's got to have a constant aperture. A lot of the media I was consuming at the time was around photography was constant aperture or bust. Constant aperture is pro. Everything else is amateurish and peasanty. So, sharpness, stabilization, constant aperture, a good enough focal range to be useful for a variety of scenarios, because again, this could be the last lens I ever bought. Now, on the other hand, I was even 6 or 7 years before I got into full frame. At that time, I was still thinking, you know, full frame is probably going to be in my future. So I wanted to have a zoom, a lens that I could, the next day, it wouldn't have happened at that age, but the next day was able to get into full frame, I'd have something to work with. So there was a lot that I was trying to think about, and price factored in as well. I ended up being able to get mine for $600 white box. Had previously been with a kit with, I think, a 5D Mark II or Mark III, and was being sold on Amazon for $600, which was a steal at the time. So yeah, it was, there was a lot that went into the decision, right? Because at the time I was shooting a bunch of travel photography. I was doing a lot more travel than I am now. And if any of y'all travel very much, you know that a lot of the, you know, historic monument sites, whatever, the places you want to go when you're traveling feel very strongly like they're designed to be the absolute worst lighting scenarios possible, right? They're trying to protect, you know, art or the archival quality of whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It's just always terrible. So I needed the stabilization because I was shooting on an XS, and that XS couldn't really create a usable file after about 400 ISO. So I needed to be able to keep a lot of images at really slow shutter speed. So optical stabilization was really important. Because it was travel too, a lot of what I was doing was travel. I wanted as big of a range as possible so that I could get every shot without having to try to change lenses or just regret that I wasn't able to zoom that extra 35 millimeters, whatever it was. So yeah, there was a lot that went into that thinking at the time. You know, all this comes together really nicely into a conversation I had the other day with a guy on my comparison video between the 80D, the XT20, and the Alpha 6300. I gave the edge to the XT20 in that video. And, you know, I've been actually getting a ton of people saying, you know, what about, you know, the XT20 versus some other camera that isn't in that comparison? And in this case, the guy was like, what do you think about between the 80D and the GX85, G85? And I told him Canon, because his usage case was he wanted better Instagram images, and he wanted to get into and make money with, as a side job, career, whatever, event and music video production, event videography and music video production. And so I pointed him in the direction of the 80D. It's not as good of a video camera as the G85 or the GX85, but I did that because Canon lenses are ubiquitous in the video production space up to a certain point, right? You can get an EF mount on the 8K, the red 8K Monstro VistaVision. Like, EF mount is big, and APS-C and Super 35 sensors in the video industry, big. So you gotta kind of tailor what you're starting with to be able to also hit your final product. And so that's kind of why I gave him that advice. And that's, to circle back around to the 24-105, that's why the 24-105 is such a great lens, right? Because you invest in it, and once you have it, you can use it for just about everything, and it's going to do a great job at most everything. Hey y'all, I would really love it if y'all would check out the Amazon affiliate links if you're interested in what I use to make this and the rest of my videos. That'll be a little bit easier than having me tell you in the comments to go check out the links. And those are affiliate links, so they will kick back a small fee to me without impacting the price whatsoever. So I especially am grateful to you for checking those out. So thank you very much. Let's get back to the video. But this is a comparison video, and despite all that really positive stuff about 24-105 as a focal range, 24-105 f4L IS USM in particular as a lens, but also options like Sony's new 24-105 f4 GOSS being on the table, this is a comparison video, right? And so we got to put in 24-70 f2.8 somewhere, and I think here would be a decent enough time to do so. You know, the 24-70 f2.8, despite having no optical stabilization, being bigger, heavier, it's become really something that I've been a lot more interested in lately for a number of reasons. And ironically, none of those detractors seem to have as big of an impact for my thinking presently as they have in the past. And I want to get into why that is. You know, I was at a local camera store the other day looking at some lenses and stuff. I do that as often as I can as often as I think I can get away with not wasting the employees' time just because I want to play with stuff. And I was comparing the 70-200 f4 and 2.8 from Sony, and I couldn't really tell the difference between the two just on the back of the camera, right? And that's because they're tele-zooms, right? There's a ton of compression involved, and if you're close enough at 70, it's not going to make a difference. At 200, there's so much compression, it's not really going to make a difference. It's arguable that with a 24-X focal range it will, right? Because despite the brighter aperture in the 2.8 version, at 24 you're still at 24, and that's a fairly wide angle. Just about everything is going to be in focus no matter what, right? But it comes in difficult lighting scenarios when you also have to have higher shutter speeds, right? So most of the photography I'm doing nowadays is limited or poor lighting situations where I need a shutter speed of 1/200 or more in order to freeze the action. And so as a result of that, I'm finding I want every extra stop of light. That extra stop of light, with the way that current IBIS works and so forth and so on, it really is going to make a difference. And if that's just cutting 1600 ISO down to 800, that's going to be a big deal. And I don't want to be demeaning with doing some basic photography math with that, but right now I'm so focused on pulling out every tenth of an EV of dynamic range. And you know, I am doing this, I am sometimes professional with photography, but I am doing this a lot right now as a hobbyist, as an enthusiast. And so I am willing to say I'm going to sacrifice some things so that I can get the lowest ISO possible, so that I can get the most dynamic range out of each image possible. And that's kind of really important to me right now. But you know, more importantly than that, the 24-70 f2.8 covers a nice, very useful, very common focal range, right? With current IBIS being as good as it is, with there being a depth of field difference, there is some difference between the shallowness of that depth of field. And with that focal range, that is the best way to replace abrasive primes. And when I'm thinking about the systems that I have and the systems that I want, the way that I want to develop them, there are basically 4.5 lenses, if you will, that I'm really into, right? There's a wide, normal, portrait tele, a kind of a dual zoom, and then later on, like for that half of a lens, be it a 70 to 200 when it becomes something that I'm interested in or need, or a 135. Not really part of the ideal kit. Something that would kind of be tacked on for utility's sake, for a job, And so, while I'm looking at all that stuff, the 24 to 70 is the easiest and best way to replace those 3 primes that I mentioned for travel, for whatever else. In terms of size, weight, and cost, by and large, you're going to see a pretty substantial difference between the 3 primes and the 1 zoom. If you're going with like the Sony FE28 55 f1.8, 28 f2, 55 f1.8 from Zeiss, and the 85 f1.8 from Sony, cost might not be a huge thing. They are small and light. There is some difference in cost, not a huge amount, but if you're going with Canon, Nikon, or Sigma primes, there will be a much bigger difference in cost between the zoom and the primes. The f2.8 zooms tend to be a lot sharper, not just brighter, but sharper than the 24 to 105s of the world. Sony's 24 to 105 is really kind of up the game in terms of sharpness, but I think that the G Master 2.8 is probably still going to be sharper, and that means a lot to me. The reason why I love primes so much, after all, is that mix master of bright and sharp. That's kind of a huge impetus for me to be doing photography on a regular basis as a hobbyist, is I love the technicality of that. I love how you can revel in the sharpness, in the detail. I love every pixel worth of detail being resolved if possible, So I know you're probably saying right now to yourself, whoop-de-doo, buddy, how original, right? But I do think I do have some original thoughts to add to that conversation. Because, I've been taking my 24 to 105 out more. I've been shooting mostly, if not predominantly, on primes lately. And so I've been taking out the 24 to 105 a little bit more lately. And, I really just don't like it. I want the stop more of light. I don't care about the stabilization. I don't care about the extra 35 millimeters of zoom. It's not bright enough, it's not sharp enough. Going back through old pictures and re-editing some of those old pictures, it's really irritating that I can't push them a little bit further because, I'm at ISO 1600 instead of 800 or 400 instead of 200, and I really wish I had that extra latitude. An f2.8 lens will help me get to those hobbyist levels of brightness and sharpness easier and quicker than a 24 to 105 f4 will. A lot of cases it is going to be cheaper than 3 separate primes. It's going to save on weight and space for considerations like travel, for considerations like being run and gun in whatever kind of situation you find yourself. And I'm kind of at a wacky point, right? Because I'm at a point where I'm getting all the performance that I want out of my 60-300, and my 60 really isn't cutting it. And so when I'm thinking about what the next full frame camera is going to be, I'm thinking like an A7R3, A7 III, whenever that comes out. But I'm also realizing that APS-C is always going to have a place in my kit bag, right? And the question then becomes, do I want that to be where the primes live or where the all-in-one zoom lives, the APS-C body? And I'm kind of at a point where I think it's going to be the primes, right? Because they're small. An f1.4 prime on an APS-C body is going to be much smaller if it's built for APS-C than a full-frame prime on a full-frame body. Additionally, you're going to see a bigger difference between f4 and f2.8 on a full-frame camera. It's going to be a lot easier to... well, I don't know about that. Basically, I just think that, f1.4 primes are smaller when they're built for APS-C than when they are for full frame. I absolutely want all those dream lenses for the full frame Sony system, assuming that's what I can get into. I mean, obviously I'd prefer a GFX 50S, but who wouldn't? But the point is that it would be redundant in the extreme to carry around 6 lenses and 2 bodies that are all designed to do the exact same thing. I'd rather have a zoom in there for safety, for, you know, dynamic environments and situations, and I'd love to have that prime, or that zoom, pardon me, also be as close to mimicking the primes as possible. I do want to check out specifically Sony's 24-105 just to give it a look-see, give it a sharpness test, but yeah, I think that's kind of what I got for you today. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Please let me know what you think about between these two focal ranges in the comments below. Check out the Amazon affiliate links, especially now that it's holiday season and down the line when it no longer is. That would mean the world to me if you'd click through those. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.